Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. This is a show designed to make the world safe for ADHDers. And we know that the average ADHD person, and especially as a child, gets about 70 critical comments a day. And that's an awful lot of getting told to improve. So, um, ADHDers, I think their main problem is that they don't look like there's anything particularly wrong, certainly not anything neurologic. They just look like they're a behavior problem. And that, of course, causes a whole lot of adult assumptions that are uninformed, shall we say. Don't want to say ignorant, but that's kind of what it is, especially if there's somebody who works with kids a lot. They should know better than to make those assumptions. Okay, but here we are. It is the first day of the new year, and probably you just went through a time of a lot of intense family interaction, and hopefully you learned some things um, on how to handle the holidays and minimize the disruption in your life and your ADHDer's life. Hopefully, if nothing else, you probably had a chance to interact with some relatives and maybe got some new information. Like in my case, um, we had some relatives by and learned a whole lot about the family history of ADHD and a couple of other things, other psychiatric diagnoses that I was not aware of. Um, it's always a good idea to have that kind of knowledge, but a lot of times people don't want to talk about that sort of stuff. So you get, what do I want to say? They're not very open about it. Let's put it that way. But it's a good idea to be as, what do I want to say? You don't want to be like you're really aggressively looking for information, but just kind of let it come to you, and it'll help a lot when you're looking at your child's and indeed sometimes your spouse's uh, family history. Uh, I learned there was a whole lot more ADHD in the family background than I was aware of. And That's good to know, especially as we go on to the future. Um, it does appear that I have a couple of more folks in my own nuclear family that are um, ADHD folks. More the inattentive type than the hyperactive type. But so that's one of the things you learn in the holidays. The other things you learn are how do your strategies, the things you're doing, help you get through the holidays with a minimum of disruption. With your child um, doing okay and not getting overstimulated or getting into trouble or that sort of stuff. Have are some of the things you're doing now working out a little bit and improving his or her behavior? I hope so. Uh, and Hope some of the things we've been talking about have been helpful. Now, one of the things I always talk about is that if you're the parent of an ADHD child, you cannot afford merely to be reactive. That is, you can't wait till it starts before you start thinking about it or prepare for it. This is pretty particularly noticeable. Well, with ADHD in general, it's particularly noticeable. Or you don't want to predict too early that some kind of things are going to happen, but you want to be prepared. Like, uh, your ADHD child, okay, is he or she becoming a teenager? Are they already teenagers? Okay, that whole presents a whole list of things that you should be thinking about. Number one, how about driving? You know your ADHD teenager is going to want to get his or her license as soon as possible. You also know that on average, or maybe you don't, but I will tell you then, on average, your ADHDer is about 3 years rather behind his peer group in terms of emotional maturity. It's just the way their brains work and grow and develop. They're a little bit slower than uh, than their peers. That means you've got to be very careful about the whole driving thing. And I don't know about in your area, but where I live, the average driving teacher in the high school is an assistant football coach. Okay, not exactly a specialized driving teacher. So you need to be make darn sure that they pass your personal uh, standards before you let them just go driving every which way. The other thing you want to be particularly aware of is that if you're going to buy your kid a car, and that seems to be very common. When I was a kid, not so much, but now pretty much everybody seems to get a car right away. For goodness sakes, think about what you're doing. Don't buy them the Corvette or the Camaro or the Mustang. Uh, get them something, big and clunky and safe. Something that doesn't go too fast. Something that won't stress their immature driving abilities, and something that they hopefully uh, can't mess themselves up with too badly. Okay. I mean, the old days we used to say, get a big, clunky, full size car. Um, you know, and then back in those days, a small engine was a V6, but nowadays, of course, they're a lot smaller and still more powerful. So, but you don't want a race car. You don't want something real hot. Okay, you want something that's safe, dependable, reliable, and not so touchy on the road that it'll challenge immature driving abilities. But you need to think about that, and you need to think about it early. Okay, you don't want to be uh, the one who gives your kid the hot car, and then he or she drives it into the trees the first night you let them drive by themselves. Okay, driving driving is dangerous, and it's getting more and more dangerous. I think as the roads get more crowded and so on. So be careful with that, and think it through, and make sure, like I said, that he or she passes your personal driving evaluation before you let them drive. They don't have a right to drive. Of course, they will be upset if they don't get to drive as soon as it's legal. But they have to pass your particular evaluation before driving should even be considered. Okay, along with driving, of course, comes the whole dating thing. Uh, Probably most of us who have teenagers, boy or girl, are terrified that pregnancy is not the number one thing we probably all worry about, and probably that's exaggerated. But I have been surprised at how different the behaviors, sexual behaviors of kids are nowadays when I was versus where I was a kid. And it is they're a lot more accepting of some pretty I would, well, intense sexual behavior, shall we say? Just leave it at that. I'm not going to go into great detail describing it, but just make sure whatever you're teaching your child, make sure they're prepared for that sort of thing. Okay, and they've thought about it a little bit. And you don't want to beat them over the head um, with your particular belief system, but you need to make sure that they know. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, there was no doubt at all. If she was pregnant, she was my wife. That was the way it was going to be, and my dad would have definitely made sure that that's what happened. Nowadays, things are a little, belief systems are a little different. I'm not sure they're well thought out, but you need to be thinking about your particular beliefs on all this stuff. And of course, with that comes, things about birth control and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you don't want to give the appearance that you're encouraging sexual behavior, but you just want to make sure they know that if they're gonna, there are some things they should do to protect themselves and so on. Um, and you need to be looking for how they are when they come in. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, any other family, but my wife and I don't think ever went to bed when there was a child out on the road somewhere. And to this day, my kids always, remind me that I always told them that nothing good happens after midnight. Therefore, I want your butt home before midnight. Uh, you know, that's, well, for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is after midnight, people on the road are at best tired and at worst drunk out of their minds. That's just the way it is, and that they're not really prepared to drive. With somebody who's so erratic on the road because of being significantly impaired. And of course, that brings up the number three issue that parents are mostly concerned with, and that's substance abuse. Uh, Drugs and alcohol. That's a whole big area, and I'm not real sure about the approach we've taken as a society on that stuff. But I do know that as parents, you need to know uh, the signs that there's something going on, and be able to recognize it and know what you're going to do as far as intervention is concerned. I mean, I don't mean you need to have a detailed plan, but you ought to have some ideas of what you do if, and that both you and your spouse are in agreement about that. Because the last thing you want is somebody comes home rip roaring drunk, and you and your spouse have not agreed on how you're going to handle that sort of thing. And I know that's a touchy one, but you've got to have at least thought about it. Okay. The good thing, or the interesting thing, I guess, is that ADHDers are more impulsive. Okay, so they are more likely to experiment with different things. But on the other hand, ADHDers who are in treatment, as in, medication, psychotherapy, coaching, all that, are less likely to have addiction problems. So another good reason for treating your child, and I think that's probably, those are the three big things that you worry about, especially if you're getting teenagers in the business. The other thing, of course, is school. Are they going to change our schools? As in going from elementary to middle school to high school, or however your school system does it. But you need to have, you know, need to know where the schools are. You need to have your kids know where the schools are. You need to go to the open houses and meet the teachers and all that sort of thing. And you need to understand that your 504 plan or his or her IEP, don't just assume that it will travel from one school to the other. Make darn sure it does, and make sure that uh, the school they're going into is aware of these programs that they're in and what the specifics of their programs are, which means you should be coordinating early with the teachers um, in the new schools, of course. I mean, and this is makes a lot of sense. Obviously, it's logical to do it, but a lot of people don't think about it, and they just get caught. And especially if, you are the parent with the ADHD, you may not be all that good at planning ahead and anticipating consequences. So whoever has that job in your family needs to be on the ball with this stuff. Okay, it's real simple to call a teacher or call the guidance counselor, and get early, have them meet you and recognize that you're a reasonable person who knows what he or she is talking about, knows the situation with ADHD and what the schools can and cannot do, and that sort of stuff. Because you need to work with these people. It's going to be a number of years before your child is out of the education system. And, the education system is probably the number one issue that ADHDers have as adults, especially if they're the ADHDers that were not diagnosed when they were in school. That's not a pretty sight a lot of times, because they get really problems with self-esteem, thinking they're stupid, thinking there's something wrong with them, they're lazy, or that sort of thing. It's one of those issues that you need to get on top of and make sure that it doesn't happen to your child, that he or she has the appropriate accommodations, interventions, and that they transfer from one school to the other. Don't assume, okay? Don't assume that they're just going to naturally do what seems logical to do. But so, and this just means you need to probably at the end of, or before the end of the year when they transfer to a new school, that you have introduced yourself to the new school and gotten ahead of the game. Okay, and there are probably other things to worry about and be concerned about, or maybe not worry about, let's just say plan for and be on top of. But right now, that's about all I've got time for. So be looking out for these issues, particularly. Obviously, the things with teenagers are, they're getting close to being adults, so their problems are close to adult sized, and you want to have intervened rapidly and early, before the situation actually happens. Okay, it's really tough when you're faced with something you hadn't even thought about before. Okay, so that's it. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass. This has been ADHD, my ADHD chat. And this is a show to make the world safe for ADHDers, because we need ADHD people. We need divergent thinkers, people who think outside the box, because those are the ones who solve all the problems that are real big ones. Convergent thinkers, they're really good at keeping the system going the way it is. not so good at changing it or recognizing that some things need to change. So we need a bunch of ADHDers who are confident and sure of themselves and will recognize some of these things and know what to do about taking care of them. Okay, we will catch you next time, and give us a look. I'd love to hear from you. Know what other topics you think I should cover. Any questions you might have. And because I mean, I take this pretty seriously. This is something I didn't plan on until my ADHD child was born, and it's become something that I enjoy doing actually. Uh, I like ADHD. The whole crowd is more interesting. Some would say exciting than just a neurotypical crowd. And I come up with some programs and courses and that sort of thing. And I'm working on a podcast on getting one of those going. So look for announcements. Okay, we will catch you later.